Welcome to the Daily Blade. The Word of God is described as the sword of the Spirit, the primary spiritual weapon in the Christian's armor against the forces of evil. Your hosts are Joby Martin and Kyle Thompson, and they stand ready to equip men for the fight. Let's sharpen up.
All right, guys, I've got to tell you, I'm pretty giddy right now. So every time I read or teach or even talk about Nehemiah 4, I get pumped up. And so that's where we're going to be hanging out the next couple of days, and that's what we're going to be covering. So let's go ahead and get into it. So the very beginning of Nehemiah 4, starting in verse 1. Now when Sanballat heard that we were building the wall, he was angry and greatly enraged, and he jeered at the Jews. And he said in the presence of his brothers and of the army of Samaria, "What are these feeble Jews doing? Will they restore it for themselves? Will they sacrifice? Will they finish up in a day? Will they revive the stones out of the heaps of rubbish and burn ones at that?" Tobiah the Ammonite was beside him, and he said, "Yes, what they are building, if a fox goes up on it, he will break down their stone wall. Hear our God, for we are despised. Turn back their taunt on their own head and give them up to be plundered in a land where they are captives. Do not cover their guilt, and let not their sin be blotted out from your sight, for they have provoked you to anger in the presence of the builders." So we built the wall, and all the wall was joined together to half its height, for the people had mind to work. But when Sanballat and Tobiah and the Arabs and the Ammonites and the Ashdodites heard that we were repairing the walls of Jerusalem, and that was going forward, and that the breaches were being closed, they were very angry. And they all plotted together to come and fight against Jerusalem and to cause confusion in it. And we prayed to our God and set a guard as protection against them day and night. In Judah it was said, "The strength of those who bear the burdens is failing. There is too much rubble. By ourselves we will not be able to rebuild the wall." And our enemies said, "They will not know or see till we come among them and kill them and stop the work." At that time the Jews who lived near them came from all directions and said to us 10 times, "You must return to us." So in the lowest parts of the space behind the wall, in the open places, I stationed the people by their clans, with their swords, their spears, and their bows. And I looked and arose and said to the nobles and to the officials and to the rest of the people, "Do not be afraid of them. Remember the Lord, who is great and awesome, and fight for your brothers, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your homes." So here we see Sanballat and Tobiah providing opposition to the work that's being done by Nehemiah and his crew in Jerusalem. But there's an acceleration in the opposition that we see in this passage, because early on, they are just jeering at the Jews as they work. But eventually, when they recognize that their words are not having the desired negative impact on the work, they plan to take things up a notch or two and become a violent opposition to the work. Now, for some people, perhaps even you in your past, negative words or trash talk would have been all it would take for you to stop doing the work that God tasked you with. So certainly for a lot of people, if you are met with literal violence in opposition to the work that God has tasked you with, you would fold up like an old lawn chair. The question is, why? Why would we stop our work just because people were taunting us or trying to physically harm us if indeed we knew that the work was for God and from God? So luckily for Jerusalem, Nehemiah and his crew were not weak and were not unprepared in the face of opposition. So what did Nehemiah and the Jews do in response to the opposition? They prayed, they worked, they prayed some more, they stood ready to meet unrighteous violence with righteous self-defense, they worked some more, they remembered the Lord, and they fought for their people. Did they just pray and hope for the best? Nope. They got after it. Did they just work and wish that God would be in it somehow? Nope. They stayed in communication with God as they did his work. Did they just close their eyes and plug their ears and hope that physical violence would never come? Nope. They stood ready to meet violence with violence. And also, we see no indication from the text that these men took a bunch of time off to get their bodies in shape and to get ready for the hard labor and the potential that they were going to have to fight. They already stood ready to do that. For some of you guys, if God called you to do his work and it required you to use your body, you wouldn't be ready to do that. Some of you have spent years neglecting your personal health and fitness, and you've got a laundry list of excuses as to why you're not where you know you should be physically. But here's the thing, if God comes calling and needs your body for his purposes, what do you plan to tell him? What excuses are you going to come up with? Because some of you guys are naturally default prayer guys. Some of you guys are naturally default work guys, and some of you are naturally default fight guys. But guys, what this story shows us is that when we're doing God's work, we need to be ready to pray, work, and fight. More on that tomorrow.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Before you go, if you want to help equip other men for the fight, share this podcast around and leave us a 5-star rating and review. Stay sharp.